Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I know cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the live broadcast of Time for Hemp all around the world at timeforhemp.com, on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and a variety of other places on the internet where people get together, break out their buds, and take time for hemp. A big shout out to all of my friends up in Canada. Send our love, of course, to KDK Distributors for all they do. And another big thank you to Paul Stanford for keeping Time for Hemp alive and kicking. It is Friday, and on Fridays we like to do a tribute to all the hard-working people around the world who oftentimes go unnoticed, only because they work so quietly and diligently that no one gets a chance to stop and pay mind to what they're doing, pat them on the back, and see how they can help. So we like to roll into a small town somewhere on the planet, find a hard-working activist, and invite them onto the program so that you can get better acquainted with them and find out what they're doing here on Time for Hemp. Michael Krawitz, my joint host, will be taking over the conversation here in a minute. And remember, anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their pipes, their vaporizers, and break out and take time for hemp. Michael, this is our last show of the year. After today, we will have one more big day of broadcasting. That'll be Sunday, when you and a few other hosts on the network will be doing your programming live. And then after Sunday's live broadcasting on the network, we are going on hiatus, holiday vacation, and we'll come back to making a lot of noise on January 6th. Michael, happy holidays.
Well, happy holidays to you too, Casper. And I can't believe it's already upon us. This year has gone so fast, but it's been quite an exciting year, hasn't it, Casper?
It really has. It started out with us working side by side together along with AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And since American Freedom Radio has gone belly up, unfortunately, and is no longer being heard from, and we have grown larger and moved forward beyond their tragedy, and now find ourselves making a louder noise as a full-blown network, so that people can find out how important it is to end prohibition.
You know, I do have an experience in computers, and I very rarely talk about this, but it does impress me that we are finally harnessing the power of the Internet. You know, when the Internet first came online, there was a lot of talk about how you could be your own radio station, you could be your own TV station, and you could do this and you could do that. And with the bandwidth that went, you never could get any of that done. But
right.
now we are starting to actually get things done, and this radio station has been a stellar example of that. Casper, I congratulate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can tell you, Michael, I didn't expect it to be this hard of a labor to make it happen, but it certainly is a labor of love.
Well, anything that's worth doing is a challenge, and I think our guest today, Mary Jane Borden, is one that can actually talk to that quite well. How about that, Mary Jane?
Oh, it's been a challenge, but it's also a blessing to be involved with this movement. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. And Mary Jane, I know that regular listeners of Dean Becker's radio show, the Drug Truth Radio Network, will know your name quite well. And you have been on the Time for Hemp radio show before. But if you could, maybe just a quick, refresher for those that haven't heard from you in a while, or for those that haven't met you, introduce us to Mary Jane Borden real quick.
Well, okay, thank you. Mary Jane Borden is from Ohio. I grew up in eastern Ohio and went to college in central Ohio. I spent 9 years in the pharmaceutical industry, analyzing all forms of the pharmaceutical, worldwide market. Before I became interested in drug policy reform towards the end of the 90s. So around about 98, I guess it was, I got interested in an organization called Drug Sense Map, www.mapinc.org. And I put out a correspondence to Mark Greer, who is the executive director, in the year 2000. And next thing I know, I was working for Drug Sense, and I've been really with Drug Sense ever since. It's a terrific organization. It's a 501c3. And it's dedicated to advocacy in the media concerning drug policy topics. So even though I worked nationally, it's kind of like one of those things that think globally, act locally. I did act locally as well, and so during that same period of time, I was involved with a couple of groups that lobbied the State House at down here in Columbus. I don't live far from Columbus. And saw 5 bills pass through the Ohio legislature, really largely unnoticed. I think the furthest we ever got was maybe a proponent testimony hearing, but it never made it out of the chamber into which it was introduced. And I think frustrated by that, I think all of us are frustrated, but I think all of us are frustrated with legislative action or inaction that we see going on across the country. We decided in 2010 to form what we call kind of an incubator for statewide ballot initiatives. And so what I do now with the Ohio Rights Group is really an outgrowth of all of that.
Well, we'll get back to that in a second, but I want to just dwell on the past just for another moment.
Okay.
You're someone that has worked with Mark Greer. I'm so glad that you brought him up. He's such a great mentor of a lot of ours in the activist movement, and don't get to see him enough anymore. And hope, Mark, hope you're doing well out there wherever you are. And you've worked with Drug Sense, you work with Drug Truth, you've edited Drug Facts, you've worked with the pharmaceutical industry. Well, what's the connection here? What in your early life brought you to the drug interactions and drug facts and things like that? What was it that keyed with you that was so interesting?
Well, it's not that I'm a drug user. I've never really done drugs. I have no interest in doing drugs. But what fascinates me is, number one, the human rights issues. I think for all my life, I think that it was human and civil rights, really. I kind of grew up in the late 60s, influenced by the civil rights movement, influenced by Bobby Kennedy, influenced by the gay rights movement. All those things were kind of, percolating in the late 60s, mid-70s, influenced me as a young person. And so my interest really lies in the civil rights approach to drugs, drug policy. And really what I see is the inherent unfairness of it, where while certain drugs that we would market in the pharmaceutical industry that were really so deadly, there are other drugs that are so safe, like cannabis, that are just absolutely verboten. And it's something that doesn't make sense. And the worst part of that is it's bad enough that people suffer because they don't have access to these therapeutic drugs like cannabis. What's worse is that people are going to jail. They're losing their houses and their families and their livelihoods to prohibition. And I guess that was really what grabs me. And I guess I should mention this. Maybe it's just an irony in my life, but I come from really the seat of prohibition, Westerville, Ohio, which is where I went to college, went to Otterbein College, and where I live is actually the seat of prohibition. It started here in 1909 with the Anti-Saloon League that was kind of made famous in Ken Burns' Prohibition documentary. They had a whole segment that they filmed here in Westerville, and I could basically see the Anti-Saloon League's headquarters from my front porch. And so this kind of thing, it's kind of maybe I, 100 years later, and the antidote to what Prohibition put in place 100 years earlier.
I find that very interesting, actually, and I'll go back. I'll trump your beginning of Prohibition in Ohio and go back to a point in Ohio even further back where Ohio's Medical Association was one of the first in the United States to study and look into the issues of cannabis before 1900, and they produced a fantastic report, which I've got on my shelf, and I plan to bring to Ohio whenever I get up there to show y'all.
And that's interesting you say that, because we've referenced that several times. And I think what's interesting not only is the fact that I think the Medical Society of Ohio met in a White Sulphur Springs, which is actually in Ohio. It's not in West Virginia. It's a place in Ohio that was once a resort. And what's interesting is that at the same time as that was being written was the same time that the Bill of Rights was written into the Ohio Constitution. It was around 1851. And so our amendment now, and we'll talk about the amendment in a little bit, is based upon those rights that were codified in 1851.
That is interesting. So tell us a little bit more about what you've learned. This has been a fascinating journey for you. I mean, you're first working within the system and then working outside the system. You have a perspective I don't know very many in the movement have.
Well, I think I do, because first of all, the industry looks at things as markets and market share. We look at things as dollars and units. How many units did you sell here and there? Because I was basically a marketing analyst, and we looked at this on a global basis because at the time, it was Adria Laboratories that I worked for. Excuse me. And at the time, we were marketing the largest selling cancer chemotherapy agent in the world. It's a product or a drug called adriamycin. Now, I think the generic name is doxorubicin. And this is the stuff that makes your hair fall out and, gives you nausea, vomiting, et cetera. It's really nasty, nasty stuff. And that was principally the product we market. So we're looking at it, from a dollars and cents product point of view. And the patent was scheduled to expire around 1988, because this was about 30 years ago. It was scheduled to expire about 1988. And what happens when a patent expires in the pharmaceutical industry, its sales will drop by at least a third, I would suggest, in the first 2 years. So Adria is looking at a real loss of revenue. And so we're looking at, what else can we put into our little revenue bucket here and market? And one of the things we looked at was Nabilone and Marinol. And the company, for whatever reason, decided not to go with the two of those. But those are two things that we looked seriously at purchasing and putting in. It would have made, if you look at it from the product perspective, it would have made kind of a nice package deal to not only have the stuff that makes you throw up and everything, but have something really a little bit more effective. Because even today, some of those, I think Megace is one of them. They're effective, but they're not effective in controlling nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy. Whereas we know cannabis is very effective, and I think Marinol is somewhat effective, except you have to take it as a pill, which is kind of counterintuitive because you're throwing up. So yeah, it was kind of weird that we would my first start into the cannabis, that form of cannabis was from the product point of view, but in the same respect, I think there was also a growing evolution at the time of the thinking about medical cannabis. I can remember I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but there were a couple who had AIDS, and they were AIDS. I saw the AIDS crisis actually emerge at Adria. I remember getting the first report from the MMR, whatever it was. But anyway, that group that publishes those from the CDC. And, watching the AIDS epidemic roll out and doing the market forecast for the patient forecast for it, they had it, exploding, hundreds, millions and millions and millions of people in the year, what would seem like, the distant future, 2004, 2005. And I think what we saw happen is, the AIDS epidemic actually kind of leveled off in terms of new cases, and I don't think that my dire predictions proved to be true. But in the same respect, at that period of time, there was a couple in Florida, I think it was, that were starting to say, hey, look, cannabis works here, And it's a real change of frame when you sit there and say, okay, you have to spend all of this money and research and everything, and a simple plant is going to do what these drugs can't do. And I think that kind of the AIDS epidemic was a turning point for my own viewpoint towards cannabis.
Yeah, you bring up Marinol. That's actually one of the very, very few pharmaceutical drugs I know anything about, and in any real way as far as the pharmaceutical industry's perspective. And two things. One jumps to mind immediately, and that is marijuana, cannabis, Marinol by extension, is the only drug out there that fights nausea that also increases appetite. That's a big deal. And they've actually gotten a lot of market share with that little tiny product. The product has I forget the words, it's market base and market share, something like that. But anyway, they have very few patients using the stuff, but the stuff costs so much that it actually creates quite a large market share of the profits. And my question to you, I guess I'm wondering, with Marinol, I don't want to get into proprietary information or anything that you're not supposed to talk about, but it seems pretty obvious to me that one of the biggest considerations might have been the cost of that drug to acquire as a drug company.
I think, I more remember Nabilone than I do Marinol, because I think Nabilone, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I never was sure about the pronunciation there. I think the company looked at that and said the side effects were too awful. They wouldn't touch it, Yeah. And then when it came back around, and it's still coming back around, I shake my head, going, "Don't you guys know this stuff is now? It's not. It's all synthetic. It's not natural cannabis. It's an analog." And so you distill cannabis in certain ways. I'm sure you could create, things that really aren't good, and I think that's the case with Nabilone. Now, Marinol, I think, is an interesting drug because it's 100% THC, 100% THC. Let me repeat that, because it's really hard, I think, for somebody to believe that when the people who endorse prohibition say, "Oh, there's this great drug out there that's been FDA approved for treating nausea and vomiting. Why do we need herbal cannabis?" They're actually endorsing 100% THC, And I think THC, among the other compounds in cannabis, is a therapeutic, has therapeutic activity. I think that's clear. It's just kind of an odd thing that Marinol is, again, 100% THC, and by virtue of that, it's extremely expensive.
I think people, I may be condescending here, I don't know, but I think people just didn't do very well in math class, because to me it should resonate a lot more with the people out there in the public when you say that marijuana, is more dangerous because it's 20% THC or 30% THC, and children shouldn't have access to this and should be taken off the streets because it's more dangerous, has more THC percentage, and in the very same breath say something about the 100% THC Marinol pill, and that's okay. And no one's brain just stops right there like mine and just looks at the complete illogic of that. I don't know. I think we have to take a break here, but we'll come back after the break, hopefully with a lot more on the Ohio Rights Campaign and with Mary Jane Borden.
Well, Hypo, good green reefer, big fat don't be much sweeter. Hide, don't hide it. Hide, don't hide it. Just lie, don't hide it. Hide, don't hide it. Well, lie, don't hide it. Fire up right now.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Excuse me for a moment while I vent about the mind-boggling stupidity of the autocratic, bureaucratic, right-wing, Neanderthal numbskulls who keep pushing an insane, inane, and inhumane holy war against marijuana, which is, after all, a weed. The most embarrassing thing for these holy warriors is that the weed is winning. They've been at this war since 1937, spending billions and billions of our tax dollars, militarizing our borders, and stomping on our Bill of Rights. They've used phone taps, garbage searches, jackbooted raids, and draconian prison terms to do what? To nab peaceful, mellow tokers who aren't bothering anyone, that's what. Despite 60 years of spending our money, they failed. 85% of Americans say marijuana is easy to obtain today. A third of our population says they've tried it. Nearly 15 million people partake of it at least monthly, and more high school students now smoke marijuana than cigarettes. Meanwhile, the holy warriors have become more fanatical and thuggish. A marijuana arrest is made every 41 seconds in America, 9 out of 10 of them for mere possession. In 2004, 772,000 Americans were arrested on marijuana charges, more than for all violent crimes combined. And 40,000 Americans are in prison today for this victimless crime, more than the entire prison populations of 8 European countries. Even sicker, the sanctimonious weed warriors have made it a crime for thousands of seriously sick people to get the medical benefits of using small amounts of doctor-prescribed marijuana. Weirdly, our doctors can prescribe cocaine for patients, but not marijuana. This is Jim Hightower saying, for information and action to stop this absurd war, call the Marijuana Policy Project, 202-462-5747.
Time for Hemp is an educational tool that can be found in iTunes, on Spreaker, and of course at timeforhemp.com.
That's the team, gentlemen. Hell yeah. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
We know them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now. We got to live. We positive. We know them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now. We got to live. Be positive. Oh well, surprise, surprise. Another ghetto youth to rise. Keeping my eyes on the prize while Babylon realize them ya youth ya could never be denied. Jah can't keep on reaching for the sky. We never divide, yeah, we stay unified, yeah. But negative and spread a positive vibe. From Belize, we spread it worldwide. Give thanks and praises unto the Most High. Don't expect a liar man to tell not lies. Don't expect a wise man for being not wise. Hello Most High and stop criticize. Fire burn through with me apply. Tell me a lies, they make them stop be a mice. Tell the backbiters make them stop make nice. All them a do a pollute. Jaggers and Jaboys, just a man for all unify. Well now them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now. We got to live. We positive. Well now them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now. Money I need to pay because it is.
Money break, want it to retain me low, no casket, allow walk bow. I'm soft like a bastard. Omo domo to return the omo you are mounted. This same woman at the omo they hot doubted. Twist bend when the wind whistle by my feet bigger than the world biggest building in Dubai. God now my keeper, no be Peter will fight. Smoke fish, this different from the world where they fight. God no seem to bring they calling me an intruder. In Jamaica, by me shower back the loot. Fire burn any man will say make a good. If you have a body tension, you better know time is there. It's for the boy, baby. Bass in the siege, we be making them crazy. Daddy on the beats like lately. If you see me on the street, come be my lady.
We know them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now. We got to live. Be positive. We know them can't stop the Rasta man from rising now. You told me say the time is now.
F-O-B-I, holla if you see ya. Lick gotta rep it and you know I do it B-I-G. And now saying it clear and loud, a lot of you would die broke if the world end now. We are victims of the system, we need to evict and kick them. Cause them know why we ride the ones we sinking our ground like quicksand. Before we started with no money and then before we got a wallet. And now before we got a account that he can go and make deposits. And I tell them sit down if they say that they can stand me. I was just a little kid that became the big topic.
This rap game is a jungle, Siberia. Can't run it, then the lion, them a kill ya. If it ain't about money, we not hear ya.
on the track all the way from Nigeria. Stop me, I dare ya. Flyers up in your area. Flow so sick, it's venereal. Swag out of space. I must be an alien. Babylon can't stop the Rastafarian.
On the program today, it is Small Town Fridays, and I'm having a joint conversation with my joint friend Michael Krawitz, and he and I are jointly chatting with one of our joint friends who's been working diligently in the marijuana movement, Mary Jane Borden. Mary Jane, is that your real name?
Everybody asks me that. Yes, it is my real name. It's the name my daddy gave me when I was born.
Well, your daddy must have been a big pot smoker. Send our love to your daddy. Send our love to your daddy and our respects to you, to his ability to pick out a great, caring name, one that everybody respects the moment they hear it. I'm going to let you get back to your joint conversation with my joint buddy there, Michael Krawitz, and I'm going to enjoy my joint here on Time for Hemp.
You do have to admit, Mary Jane, that you have a great name to be in the marijuana movement with.
I did get a lot of interesting comments. Here's an irony. There's a heavy metal band named Mary Jane. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or not, but it's kind of a little off spelling my name, but they call themselves Mary Jane. And they had a heavy metal concert that I spoke at on last Friday. And if you know me, you know that I probably don't really fit in that well with the heavy metal crowd, and so they're out there, shouting Mary Jane, Mary Jane. And, I'm kind of looking around my shoulder, going, huh, just I answer to that,
That's great. What a great story. So, Mary Jane, so we do have a lot that we can cover in Ohio. I mean, you've described, the same kind of situation, I guess, that we face in Virginia and elsewhere with this straight uphill battle in the legislature, and what have you done to work around that? What's the kind of the battle plans that you've come up with?
Well, as I think I mentioned this earlier, since I started doing this in about the year 2000, there have been 5 bills that have been introduced in the Ohio legislature. It's like one every, Ohio legislative sessions are 2-year sessions, so it's like one bill per session. And basically they go nowhere. We have a wonderful representative, former Senator Hagan, who has judiciously, challenged the system and introduced these bills and been very much of a champion for our cause. But it just seems like sometimes it rings hollow. And these legislators, have either tried cannabis at one point in their lives or they're closeted in favor of it. But for some strange reason, they just can't get past this prohibition bar that keeps them from, either providing joint support or maybe a companion, House Senate bill to go with the one that's been introduced. It depends on House Senate. We've had them introduced into both, but not simultaneously into each of them, And that just doesn't happen here. So we got frustrated. And like I say, I think I was telling you this earlier, started what I call an incubator for statewide ballot initiatives in 2010. And I work from Columbus, so, this is kind of Columbus, Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio focused. And since then, we've gone through 3 different versions. And I'm really proud of each of them. Each of them are great pieces, and each of them, succeeded or failed. I mean, the current one has not failed and will not fail, but the first 2 succeeded and failed just based on circumstances that, that were present at the time. And I say that because the very first one was one where it laid out a distribution system for cannabis in Ohio. And it did it in a fairly detailed way. It had medical cannabis, what do I want to call it, retail establishments, which were basically dispensaries. It had safety and compliance centers. It had cooperatives built into it. It had infused product manufacturers into it. This is a whole regulatory system that's based upon the fines and fees that are found in the Ohio Revised Code for alcohol. So it really was truly a measure that was, kind of based upon, how alcohol, at least let's say wines and vineyards, are regulated in the state of Ohio. Well, the problem is that when you lay out a regulatory system, it takes about 30 pages to do that. And in Ohio, in order to get certified to collect the signatures to place an amendment on the ballot, your summary of that 30-some pages has to somehow match the full text of the 30-some pages. And I honestly came to the conclusion that was humanly impossible. And the Attorney General agreed, I guess, with us, and he rejected that amendment principally because of its length, because, in fact, the summary did not match the full text. And so we were really devastated. This was back in 2011. And so, but we weren't ready to give up. So we're back to the drawing board. And about the same time, the DEA was commencing raids against the dispensaries in California. And I think this is outrageous, whether it's in California or Montana or Michigan. The states have gone in, and they, either by virtue of an initiative process or by virtue of their legislatures, have passed measures that make medical cannabis legal. And I think that the federal government needs to honor that, and because the states were supposedly the incubator for new policies. Let them be that. But the powers that be, the federal government, didn't see it that way, and have been on a very aggressive campaign to basically shut down this industry, no matter where it starts in its infancy. And we think that's unfair. When it comes right down to it, and I was talking about this a little earlier with respect to the Ohio Constitution, we have these inalienable rights. They already exist for us to use cannabis therapeutically. And in Ohio, that's the right to life, liberty, property, happiness, and safety. And if you read the Bill of Rights in the Ohio Constitution, you go, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing here. And obviously, it was written at a time when, cannabis was coming to the fore back in the middle 1800s. With that in mind, then we kind of switched gears. We said, this next measure that we're going to craft is going to be not 33 pages. It's going to be as short as we could possibly make it. And so in that spirit, looking at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, remember I said that I kind of have a civil rights, always have had this civil rights mindset. We thought, and we do. We have, according to the Constitution, the right to use cannabis. It's safety for one reason. One of the safest known plants on the planet. So safety right there speaks to us. So as we say, based upon these Bill of Rights, we constructed our second measure, which was actually certified by the Ohio Attorney General for statewide signature gathering back in January of 2012. And we had all along, like I say, starting the incubator in 2010, we all along kind of said, I'm going to shoot for that 2012 election. It's going to be a great big presidential election, get lots of traction. So we named our ballot measure, the Ohio Medical Cannabis Act of 2012, and on and on and on. But I think what we failed to realize, failed to realize a couple of things. One of the major things I think we failed to realize was the amount of air that just gets sucked out of the body politic, that gets sucked out of the media, gets sucked out of advocacy issues because of a presidential election. And I think you could see that, in the Obama versus Romney election in 2012, that really, when it came down to it, that's really all you heard about those last few months. Romney this, Obama that. And I think, thank God, we heard there was initiatives as well in Colorado and Washington. But as far as Ohio goes, remember, Ohio's a quintessential swing state. We realized it just wasn't going to happen here. It was just not to be for 2012 in Ohio, and that just crushed us. We did. At that point, we knew that we weren't going to make the ballot, and about the same time we knew we weren't going to make the ballot, a little bit of icing on the crushed cake was that Chase Bank forced the closure of our checking account because we had the word cannabis in our name. Ohio Medical Cannabis Association. We renamed ourselves from ACT to Association. Ohio Medical Cannabis Association was not an allowed name as far as Chase Bank was concerned. They forced close the account. At the same time, we realized we weren't going to make the ballot, And about that same time, a couple of members of the board said, I quit. So the whole thing just came crashing down on June 2012, and it was just devastating. And we still, though, had interest. We still had a lot of interest in what we were doing, and then so a couple of now just dear friends of mine approached us and said, we want to continue to work on this. And in the ashes of what had fallen apart, we decided to hold off on making any decision making until November after the election. This would have been November last year. And we got together. There happened to be from Oberlin. And so we went up to Oberlin, we had a meeting, and, it just kind of, the spark was ignited. We knew what we had to do. We had to do it again. Third time's a charm. Do it again. And this time, we knew one thing that was missing from the last version, and that was hemp. Hemp is such an important component to the whole cannabis movement, I think, because I think we need to look at cannabis holistically, and our motto became from that, one plant, many uses. So that one plant has the use over here, tremendous medicinal properties and potential, and over here it has tremendous industrial properties and potential for an Ohio that is in a quintessential, manufacturing state, for just to name one major quality that Ohio has going for it in that regard. So with that holistic point of view, bringing the hemp into it, keeping the rights, but bringing the hemp into it, we recrafted slightly and renamed the measure the Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment, and we reformed the advocacy organization to be the Ohio Rights Group so that we didn't get in any issues with the forced closure of the bank account. And we were certified to collect our signatures with this new language in May this past year. And I have to tell you, 2012 has been nothing short of a rocket ship for me. It's just been incredible. The outpouring of support and the people, the volunteers have just been incredible. It's kept us unbelievably busy. I think all of us are just overwhelmed with this, and we're doing our very best to get it on the 2014 ballot. So I'm going to leave it at that and let's see if you have any more questions for me.
Well, actually, it's a good time for a commercial break to pay our bills, and then when we come back, we'll take a whole lot more time for hemp.
Well, now, chocolate cake makes my poor stomach ache, and all those pills are too much for me to take. I don't like cocaine 'cause it makes me all uptight, but coffee and reefer makes me feel alright. Crystal meth will make you high, and it's cheap.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Thank you for tuning in. My joint host, Michael Krawitz, and I know he and his joint guest, Mary Jane Borden, have much to complete in their little joint conversation, so I'm going to pass this joint chat back to them here at Time for Hemp.
Well, thanks for that, Casper. Just before we break, you had mentioned hemp and how you thought hemp was integral to a successful state action in Ohio, which I imagine has a lot to do with the part of the region of the country. Seems that was a very big issue in Kentucky, where actually we got the hemp bill through. We haven't yet gotten the medical marijuana bill through. Hemp, to me, seems like actually one of the more scary things in marijuana activism. Ironic, because hemp is just completely innocuous. You couldn't do anything harmful with it without having tonnage of it. You couldn't even get enough to get an average marijuana smoker high. But yet at the same time, it still is considered marijuana by the DEA. And when you're growing hundreds of thousands of plants on hundreds of acres, the plant numbers exceed the death penalty numbers for the federal government. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that's kept people from cultivating hemp. So I do appreciate your words about hemp and the importance of it. But it's been a difficult thing to incorporate, hasn't it?
Well, what's interesting about hemp, I have always been focused, as you know, from my background on the drug side of things. That's just where my brain is, and my background is, my understanding is. So I needed a little bit of education on hemp, and I saw a way that I thought was just genius, and that is this: that Ohio is the quintessential manufacturing state. We were known for cars and big, heavy industry goods. Ohio is a quintessential manufacturing state. It is also the quintessential agricultural state. We're a huge agricultural state in Ohio. You go north of where I live, and you see nothing but rolling cornfields and wheat fields, and it's a beautiful, beautiful state. But it has huge agricultural industry. And then Ohio is also the quintessential distribution state. We're probably, within 6 hours of just about any major metropolitan area on the East Coast or in the Midwest. Of course, not California, but nonetheless, we have a distribution network that is probably the envy of any other states, with the interstates that crisscross it, east-west, north-south, to both catacorners, and not to mention, air freight out of several major airports. So with all that combined, manufacturing, agriculture, distribution, we are the place where the hemp industry should begin and end. We have it all. We have the ability to make goods here. We have the ability to grow the product that goes into making those goods, and we have the ability to distribute them really anywhere within that 6 hour radius of Ohio, or even internationally, with our air transport facilities. So what we believe here in Ohio is that hemp can be our number one industry. And remember, Ohio has gone through this Rust Belt phases, and I remember the days with the big steel industries, the big car industries, and the people who could make a middle class wage, just ordinary families by working in those industries. And those industries have nothing short of collapsed in Ohio and exited to all other parts of the world, leaving, as they say, really true Rust Belt, leaving a lot of poverty, a lot of unemployment, and all the commensurate things that go with it. We bring hemp into Ohio. We apply our manufacturing prowess to it, our distribution to it, and our ability to grow it to it. We have a major new industry that we can lead the world in. And that, I think, is probably one of the most powerful parts of our amendment, is the ability to unleash and take the harnesses off of hemp and just let the industry grow and develop and make Ohio restore Ohio to what it was, a century ago as a real leader in world industry. And like I say, that is to me the crux of hemp in terms of what we're trying to do here. And and it's interesting that you mentioned hemp too, Michael, because the other side of it. Now, I remember it isn't the brain that thinks medicine. There is also this medicinal component of hemp that we're finding with the CBD, which is more prevalent in hemp than it is in just regular, smoked marijuana that's grown to emphasize the THC. And we've done a lot of work recently with children of epilepsy, and apparently, as you saw from Dr. Sai Gupta, the CBD component of cannabis is maybe very useful, very, very therapeutic for children who have these intractable epilepsies and what's called Dravet syndrome. And I mean, this is just a tragedy that has unfolded before us. As I said, I think to many people, and said to you earlier, Michael, we've had these meetings with these Dravet syndrome children, and I swear, there's not a dry eye in the room. There is just not a dry eye in the room, and these parents live in terror every day for losing a child to these seizures. Maybe as many as 20, 30, 40 seizures a day. Or one had 300 a week. They're developmentally disabled. If we can use hemp to help these children, why? Is there any good reason not to? I can't think of a good reason not to pass the amendment. If we could just do that alone, that alone should be a mission. Not to mention all the other things that our amendment and cannabis embody for Ohio.
I had to bear many minutes, unbearable minutes really, of politicians talking about if we could just save one child with their ridiculous ideas for more and more drug policy, which was just making it more and more dangerous on the streets. But here we have a case where we really can save one child, and there really isn't any moral reason or justification not to. I can't believe that we're almost up in an hour already. I really do appreciate you coming on. The issues that you're coming into there in Ohio are very relevant for the nation, and I definitely wish you well. How can people come in and help out with the campaign? What is it that people can do?
Well, several things. First of all, volunteer for the campaign. Go to OhioRightsGroup.org, OhioRightsGroup.org, and sign up as a volunteer. You can collect signatures. You can help us, in any of the other activities that go into running a nonprofit. We are a full registered nonprofit in the state of Ohio. That's the Ohio Rights Group. The Ohio Rights Group is a full registered nonprofit in the state of Ohio. 501c4, because we're engaging in advocacy for a constitutional amendment. You can help us. I mean, people out there who are short of time but have lots of money, whoever you are, we need your help monetarily. Fellow initiatives and advocacy are expensive propositions, and we have a lot of people who oppose us who have big budgets. Think of the big budget of the federal government alone, billions and billions of dollars to oppose what we're doing. And so what we need to do is to maybe reach in your wallet during the Christmas season. Think maybe about these Dravet syndrome children. Think about what good it will do when this time next year after our amendment passes. It'll be perfectly legal for them to use this medicine, perfectly legal to grow it, and it's going to take your time and your dollars to do it, and that's just the reality of it. And I hate to sound weird here, but we really need your monetary help. So donate. Go to OhioRightsGroup.org and donate. Hit the donate button, and just to get the word out about us too. Get the word. If you're not in Ohio, tell your friends in other states what we're doing, because the ballot language we have here in Ohio is unlike anything anyplace else. We're not telling people how many plants they can grow. We're telling them that they have the right. They have the constitutional rights to do this. It's listed there already in the Constitution as merely a reaffirmation of those rights. And this is something I think that's missing from all these other measures that has caused these other measures to crash and burn into some of these other states. I talk about Montana. It's just a decimated program. A lot of problems in Michigan, all of which would have been alleviated if they had had the fundamental right to use. The fundamental right to use is missing from just about all of those measures. We got it here in Ohio, and that's really, really important. So, again, I'm asking you to support us. Come out. If you're an Ohioan, make sure that you're registered to vote, and make sure that you can, vote for this measure when it comes on the ballot in 2014. So I hope I've covered all my bases there, Michael.
I think you have.
If there's anything else I need to let you know about. Michael, I need to let you know that Michael's going to come here to Ohio and help us as well.
Yes, coming up next month, we'll be planning a tour, meet with some vets, and hopefully introduce some veterans to their own facility leadership in the VA system, kind of a little veterans tour that we've been working on. And I applaud your efforts to create a constitutional amendment. Many say that's why the medical marijuana provision in the Colorado law, Amendment 20 there in Colorado, was so powerful, is because of its constitutional status. That's awesome. And for those out there that are wondering if this is really important to fund and get these done, even in Ohio, even if you're not in Ohio, think about this. Right now, we're using these cannabis hemp oils from Romania and elsewhere where we have no idea what's in it. A lot of the issues that have been brought up have been surrounding the hemp farmers in the United States not being able to grow it, and how we should be able to grow it in the USA for many reasons. But I'll add another one, and that is, if we're growing in Ohio, we could grow the hemp with the eye towards the medicine and make sure that it's not filled with any kind of bad pesticides or anything like that. We'd have a lot more control on those things. And patients are using those oils right now that are extracted from the sticks and stuff from hemp over in Romania. And I don't know how great that is.
Right. Like I say, Ohio can create a tremendous industry for the rest of the nation. We can serve an example to the nation as to how to do it right. And really also, like I say, I want to touch on the veterans if I can real quickly here, because veterans are a really important part of our outreach. What is it? How many veterans per day are committing suicide or attempting suicide, just because of the trauma of having gone through that experience? That doesn't have to happen. That is not necessary. If we can get veterans the cannabis and the therapy that they need, we all win to that. Not only does Ohio win with passing hemp, as we talked about earlier, but we keep our veterans with us. We gain from their knowledge and their experience. And I think that the great tragedy, one of the great tragedies of our time can be avoided if we can make cannabis legal in the state of Ohio and provide safe legal access to it for our veterans.
Well, I want to thank you for being part of our show today, Mary Jane. It's been an honor to have you part of our family here over the years, and it's nice to know that you'll be visiting many of our programs here on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. I know our audience always benefits when you take time to visit with us here on Time for Hemp. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Michael, I thought you might find this interesting. Ben Swan has such a fun time on our show that not only is he coming back for another visit, but he's also joining our network here. He's going to be giving us regular programming on the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network. Ain't that cool?
That's fantastic. I really, really, really loved interviews with Ben Swan, and I so appreciate all the radio time that we've had with all our great guests, and the work that I've been doing with Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. We're just getting started. That's all I got to say on all that is we're just getting started.
That's true, Michael, isn't it? We are now just getting started. We just finished our website, technically, about 2 days ago, and an amazing team of people who have all come together on behalf of the world to let the whole planet know how important it is to take time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for hemp! Yeah!
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. the only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.
Here's a little something I noticed that I want to share with people while I have an opportunity. It was by the ACLU. They are focused on the fact that prison phone companies are making a profit off of families, and what an outrage that is. And they state that today 2.7 million children have parents behind bars, and for these kids, losing a parent to incarceration can be as traumatic as losing a parent to death or divorce. Prisoners are often housed hundreds of miles away from their families, making phone calls the only way to connect on a routine basis. But for-profit prison phone companies like Global Tel Link have gotten away with charging sky-high rates to prisoners and their families, making it too expensive for families to stay connected. Prisoners are charged up to $17 for a 15-minute phone call, a call that might cost $2 if you were living outside prison walls. Phone companies shouldn't be able to profit off of prisoners trying to be good parents and good family members. Steep prices mean many prisoners won't be able to call home as often, and that's bad for public safety. When prisoners keep in touch with their families, they are less likely to reoffend and wind up back behind bars. The Federal Communications Commission took an important first step in August by capping the price of prison phone calls made from one state to another at 25 cents per minute. But most prisoners are serving time in their home state. Tell the FCC to finish the job and add predatory practice for all prison phone calls. Please go to the ACLU.org and find out how to sign the petition urging the Federal Communication to cap the in-state prison phone rates at a fair price.